Welcome to the Limitless Entrepreneur Podcast, your weekly dose of strategies and mindset tools to build a business in alignment with your purpose and to get you playing a bigger game. I'm your host, Nicole Lano. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Limitless Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm your host, Nicole Lano, and as always, I am thrilled to be here with you, and I'm thrilled to be here with a special guest today. I'm actually here. What I'm excited about talking about today is I don't know about you guys, but I'm kind of like, I'm really over reels. I'm really over overthinking content and trying to be everywhere. I can get in my head about this stuff, and it causes me to shy away from social media and shy away from putting my message out there. And I hate that. And I have to examine this myself all the time. Like, what am I holding back from? Why don't I want to do something that was easy for me at one time? Why don't I want it? Why am I resisting this right now? I don't resist my message. I don't resist speaking to people. I'm not afraid of being seen, but it's the method a lot of times is where I'm getting caught up. And when I catch myself there, I move through pretty quickly, but a lot of us can get stuck in that space. And knowing your message and then having a structure that you can rely on that feels good to you, I think that involves video where you are getting the juice from the algorithm. You are actually utilizing the tools that they want you to use that are going to get you the greatest reach, but you're doing it in a way that's on your terms. You're doing it in a way that's really positioning you well. And that's exactly what my guest and I are going to talk about today. And she's an expert in this category. Her name is Jocelyn Montemarnao. She's the founder and award-winning content strategist. She's a dedicated tea drinker. Love it. I have my tea right here on my desk as well. We're having virtual tea together, and an outdoor enthusiast of connect through content. Jocelyn, welcome. Tell everybody, I like to let the guests introduce themselves, really. So tell everybody a little bit about you.
Hi, thanks, Nicole, for having me on here. And yeah, I'm Jocelyn. I help rising thought leaders create a video podcast show so they can stand out, connect with more of the right people, and generate those consistent organic leads and sales with ease without what you were just talking about, without that stress of the latest Instagram or iOS updates that kind of keep us in that mentality of, I need to keep up with the trends and beat the algorithms and take us out of our zone of genius and create that like little bit of obsession or stress and frustration over how to show up online.
Exactly. No, and like, it doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't, especially if you're an expert. I work with so many people. It's like, you have so much to say, but we get stuck in the, how do I say it? And I love this idea of a video podcast. I was intrigued by it when you messaged me about it, and you were like, I want to talk about this. This is what I'm doing right now. And I'm really intrigued by it because I think that, obviously I have a podcast, so I love it. I record video for the podcast. So I'm like, I kind of have that already. And I'm really interested in hearing what you have to say about how you help your clients actually build this out and how it's used to leverage a real content strategy that builds authority. And so we were talking a little bit before we started about the Reels thing. And what I hate about Reels, it's not the short form video. I do kind of hate dancing because I'm like, this isn't me. And it sort of felt like Instagram was telling me I had to dance to get my message out there, and that I had to kind of like, and I really resented it. And I was like, basically like, fuck Instagram. Sorry if anyone has their kids in the car right now, but that was how I felt. I felt really irritated by it. But when I examined it further, I was like, no, what I really hate is that you're rewarded for doing what everybody else is doing. You're rewarded for being just like everybody else. In fact, that's the only way that you can get it to work is what's working for other people right now. Let me do exactly the same thing. And I'll just put a box with some different words under it. And then I'll write a caption. So you're still doing the caption part. You're still writing it all. It's making more work, and you're turning people's heads by being just like everybody else. And that kind of goes against my entire grain. And when I add my human design into it and I look at it and I'm like, no, that's exactly what the repressive nature of my branding sign, my conscious sun, this And I was like, that's why I hate it so much, because it's actually what makes me feel like I'm crawling in a hole. And this is what might be why I feel like I want to die, doing these things, like being like everybody else. So what is your answer to this? So video podcasts, tell me about, how did you kind of start down this path with your clients?
Yeah. So I started with, most of my clients were using video in some way, even before the podcast piece came into it, because video is just so powerful. And it was a lot easier for me. A lot of my clients are, experts in what they do, and they often, don't take to sitting down and like typing out on a computer really well, but they do really well just speaking through, questions and ideas and concepts. So it was a lot easier for me when I was working as a, content manager and working with retainer clients to ask them to record video for me, because I could say, hey, I need a video on this topic. I need you to hit on these key points. And then as, their content manager, I'm able to take that and just do so much with that one video. So I was turning that one video into an article version for their blog, and then also taking that video, posting it to YouTube, and taking that video and cutting it up into these short form pieces that are a lot better performing on social. So it was so much easier for me to work with somebody like that when they had that video asset. So that's really where it got started. And then I was like, in the world of expert-based businesses where, we're sharing our expertise and everything like that, podcasting is obviously huge. So I was like, there's not too much of a difference between all this, different content. We can repurpose a video into an audio format as well. So that's what led me to add that layer on of like, hey, we already have this incredible content that was originally created for video. Let's also turn it into that podcast format as well. So where it's kind of led me is now to this point where if we start with that video podcast, we're able to do what I call cross-channel leverage, which is take that video podcast, you're able to post it to YouTube, tap into that YouTube SEO, you're able to pull the audio, have the audio, doing SEO on all of those podcast platforms, and you're able to transcribe it into an article for your website. So you're tapping into Google SEO. All of that gives you that recurring traffic. And then on top of that, you get the added benefit of being able to take content that has your message really ingrained in it, your differentiator, your approach, your stamp on it, and slice that up into those short reels. So you can tap into reels, and if you're on TikTok, you can tap into TikTok, whatever platforms you're on. But you're doing so in a way, like you mentioned before, that is on your own terms and really prioritizes your message and what you want and need to be sharing and what your audience wants and needs to hear in order to ultimately feel confident in purchasing from you, rather than like, what is trendy this week and what's going to get the most likes. I would rather you have a piece of content that is so aligned with what you do and so aligned with what your audience needs to hear that even if it only reaches 100 people, those 100 people are really deeply resonating with what you have to say, rather than having a reel that reaches 100,000 people, but because it's not really centered around your message, it's not really highlighting your perspective and your differentiator, it's not actually getting people to take that next step with you and become a lead or sign up to work with you or building that deep, like, no trust.
So here's what I love about this. There's a list, but so I just kind of want to highlight a few things that came through here. As you were talking about that, the process that you go through with your clients. So you're sending them questions. You're being like, here are the questions that I want you to answer. Do it on video, which I love that you saw there, that maybe it took them a long time to get back to you if they had to write it, or they weren't getting it done in time, because you run VIP days, right? You work with people very closely for a short period of time, kind of bang this out and then move on. So in that short period of time, like, that's a lot of work to get done. And I definitely fall into that category where it's like, I could talk till the cows come home, but sometimes when I go to write, unless I'm in the right state of mind and in this kind of inspired state, it could take me a long time where I could just talk to you and I could just talk about it. As a generator or a manifesting generator, so if you're listening to this and you're a human design person and you're a generator or a manifesting generator, this is just a golden way to work. Have an expert ask you questions. That gives you something. Your strategy is to respond. So now you're responding and you're able to just say like, oh, because that's all we're waiting for is someone to ask me a question. Generators are just like, somebody ask me a question. Someone say something that I can have an opinion on. Someone give me something to respond to, because that's how you access your genius. So I love generators, and Manny Gens were 70% of the population, probably hitting mostly that group. And even the people who are projectors, they can still, you're inviting them into something. So I love that give and take. You're getting people over that hump so naturally. But the other thing is, you're giving your content legs without having to really do another step, without having to, it's that, and we've heard this strategy before of like the hero piece of content and then cut it up and then do, but I think it stumps people a little bit sometimes. How do I break that up? How do I create a hero piece of content with the intent of breaking it up? And I've struggled with that myself too, because if you're talking like stream of consciousness, you might not be like, here's a clip, here's something that works. How do you go about doing that? Or how can somebody be thinking about creating a big piece of content, the video podcast, with the intent of repurposing it and cross-promoting it?
Yeah, great question. So, it starts with, there is a slight difference between just like, if you just do YouTube and that's your strategy versus having a video podcast, because podcast is a slightly different strategy in the sense that it is a show. So there is like a premise that goes with that. So you want to make sure first and foremost that you start with identifying what the premise is of your show, your video podcast. That way that premise, and that the easiest way to describe the premise, it's like the unique angle and the red thread that like goes through everything and pulls it all together. So for you, like human design is obviously weaved in through, your solo episodes, your guest episodes, you're bringing that up. So there's that nice like red thread that helps bring the premise of your show together. So you want to make sure that you have that, because that helps set obviously the entire tone. But then essentially when you're creating your video episodes, it's very easy to turn that into that, YouTube audio and written content. Written content is just the transcription of that episode, but you go in and of course you add in some titles and like, headlines and things like that. But those are like the easiest ones because it's really just the same thing in what I call reformatting. So the specific type of repurposing where all you're doing is taking that same piece of content and turning it into a different format without really changing much. The other type of repurposing is slicing. That's where you're actually breaking down that big piece into the smaller pieces. And, again, tapping into what is most common, those clips for social, those, 30 seconds to even like 3 minutes. Sometimes I know that goes outside of reels, but that's still like a nice amount of time for a social clip. Short enough where, somebody might stop and watch that snippet, but not long enough where you might need a little bit more space if you're clipping something to communicate a full point. But essentially what I do is I make sure all my clients have their templates so that it's really easy for them to, go through, have their episode, and we go through and clip out, okay, this was, a key point, a key takeaway, a quote that sounded really great. This was a concept that I explained here or a guest explained here that really highlights, something we want them to understand. So you're pulling out those, what I call captivating clips from inside of the episode. And then because you have things like your templates already created, you're just dropping them into those templates and keeping it really easy for yourself. You can also, of course, repurpose your episode content into different formats. So you can do quote cards and carousels and things like that as well. Obviously, I'm just recommending those clips because it's like the easiest way without needing like additional graphic designers or anything like that. You're able to maximize that video clip. But yeah, it's really just about going through and looking for those moments in your episode that highlight a key concept that you're explaining or a key takeaway or just one really powerful idea that you want your audience to understand. And then when you're sharing that clip to your social platforms, I'm assuming most people are Instagram people that are listening here. I feel like most of us are. When you're sharing those to, reels and things like that, then those little clips start pulling people in. It's this nice, easy gateway for somebody to get that snapshot of like, oh, I understand what Nicole does because, this little clip is pulling me in. It gives them a nice entry point, rather than, oh, my first interaction with Nicole is listening to a 40-minute podcast episode. That might be a little bit hard at first to get somebody, in the door.
Yeah.
But a nice social clip, if I see that and I'm like, oh, that really resonated with me, let me check her out. And then I go check her out. And I'm like, oh, she has a show. And I want to listen to that because that clip was so powerful. So that's ultimately the goal is, you're extending the reach of your show by breaking it out and giving people these nice points to go through and then really honing it in. If somebody missed an episode or something, you're really, honing that key point in across your channels.
Well, and I could even see you taking, because this is what you're doing too, is you're really going in and redigesting your show. You're doing the show, you're hitting your key points, but then you're going in and you're listening to it. It's giving you something else to respond to, or you're having a team member do it. Yeah. I have my team member. She comes in and processes all the podcast episodes. She pulls out quotes. She does all of that stuff. So I get another set of eyes on it. I get somebody else saying like, this is what I thought was interesting. Mm-hmm. And then I go back and I listen to it and I kind of give my 2 cents and be like, I think this is where we're landing with this episode. I love that idea of like going back to your episode and just redigesting it and hearing it again and experiencing it again. And then a lot of times that can turn into an email to your list where it's you're taking like the lesson you learned from the episode that you put together. What stood out to you? Because usually there's something different to me that stands out than in the moment necessarily. Mm-hmm. Which is sort of like, it's just kind of an exciting byproduct of the show. But do most of your clients do solo shows, or does this work for interview style podcasts as well, or hybrids like mine?
Yeah. So I always recommend a hybrid version because when you're an expert-based business owner, you really need those solo episodes to, again, give your audience the insights, the context, the information that they need to understand your approach. So those are very important, obviously, for your content to actually help and support the sales journey for them. And I love the guest episodes from the perspective of being able to leverage, again, I'm all about like, how can we use one strategy to really like leverage what you're doing and get the most out of it. And when you have those guest episodes, when you're conceptualizing, what types of guests should I bring on and what should my guest series be to be able to support my premise, it gives you that opportunity to bring on people who could be partners and promoters, even prospects potentially that you can have on your show. And then those also turn into different sources of potential revenue, either in the form of collaboration or guest speaking opportunities or affiliates, joint ventures, like anything like that as well. So I also love having that guest format so that you can develop those relationships and you're really building out like a whole other area of your business as well, that can support your growth, but it's all through that one strategy of, having this show for your business. So yes, absolutely. You can use it for your guests. And then that's even better if you are on like Reels and social too, because on Reels, you can do collaboration type posts. So you can take a clip from your episode that you did with the guests and post it to Reels and have it be shared on both people's pages. So you're really extending the leverage for your guest as well as for yourself by tapping into those two audiences now. So that's a really cool feature that is fairly new and easy to leverage if you have collaborative content too.
No, that's awesome. I was curious. I'm like, is this really meant for, because you can control the conversation, but I don't think that's great interviewing. You like to see where it goes. So you never know necessarily what direction you're going. And there's that through line of like, this is where I want to end up. I want people to understand this at the end, but let the conversation roll where you want it to. And sometimes that can lead to Like, where do I cut this, or how does it work? I was curious how you worked with your people. And the other question that I have for you is, so how are you working when you're developing this content strategy? So we're talking about the mechanics of it. We're talking about using video. We're talking about using video in an easily accessible way for people to create. We were talking before the show, not vlogging or having that YouTuber presence where you feel like you have to have like snappy, snazzy editing and a big studio and all of this stuff, and someone to follow you around on a dolly filming you. That you don't have to have that it can be as simple as you and I talking right now on Zoom can be the foundation of your content strategy. But when you're formulating how the show comes up, how you're taking like, okay, here are the content pillars, here's what we're working toward. Are you working backwards from the offer suite that they have? Take us through a little bit of the process there of figuring out like, what is the right content to have in this show?
Yeah, this is the most fun part for me, because this is where I actually get to like put my strategy hat on, which is really my zone of genius. And yeah, so yes, of course, your show is going to be aligned with your dream audience, your dream target customers, and it's going to be aligned with what you are offering today. But one of the biggest components of my approach to a show strategy is also understanding your vision, because I really want you to be able to build a community of people that have a shared vision of the future that you do. And that's so important for two different reasons. Number one, it's what helps get people to care. I think a lot of times we're so focused on, when we're talking about our offer, we're so focused on like that result, that tangible result, right? Because we're selling what they want, like, oh, I want, organic leads or organic sales, right?
Yeah.
But that vision really gets them to care, and to care now a lot more, because it's talking about what the impact that result is going to have on their life. So for me, that's going to make sure that, when my clients have organic leads, which is like the result that they want, that's ultimately going to allow them to have a bigger impact and be able to show up more easily online without needing to do all of this like crazy stuff. So the big vision I have is that it's a lot easier for experts to be able to show up purposefully on their own terms without burning out, and simply reach more of the people that need them so they can make a bigger impact and continue to serve their people. I don't want my clients, keeping up with all of these trends. That's not their zone of genius. That's not where we need their work in the world. We need them serving their community of people. So that vision is really tapping into what gets people to care, which we can often forget to mention in marketing, but is really important. And then it's also really important for the evolution of your business. I mean, I want you to have a community of people that grows with you. So yes, it's aligned with your offer today, but what if your offer changes? Or what if you add on another offer? Hopefully the work that you are doing in your business is something, I call it your life's work, in terms of like, what I do today is video podcasting. That might look different. There might be other things that I support with down the road, but I'm always going to be working on simply how can I help thought leaders and rising thought leaders be better communicators so their marketing is more effective and they spend less time actually marketing and more time actually serving the world with their purpose, right? So that's always going to be my North Star. How I get there might look different. So that's a very big piece of the show strategy, is that vision, so that we have a whole community of people around that grows with you and can sustain your business for 5 years, 10 years, beyond. And that's usually what's missing from many shows, because people are so focused on the how-to that they're missing that like aspirational element to it. So I really want to make sure that we pull that in. So yes, it's important to have your ideal customers, your offer suite in mind, but also that vision, and then that unique way that you're getting people to that vision. That's that like angle that you take that comes through on every episode. Again, for an example of this, Nicole is doing a great job. She has different guests that she brings in different episodes, but it all, comes back to a conversation about, how this can work better with your human design.
And I'll say too, like, my bigger vision is about how to help you get out of your own way. how to live more authentically, how to open yourself up so you deal with less resistance, so that you're able to show up as your fully expressed self. Because when you do that, the organic leads come, the right opportunities come to you. I've come through many modalities that I use. I use EFT, I use NLP, I have a strategic background, and I use human design. These are, and who knows, I might use something else in the future that I add to this, all in service to the same overall mission, which is to help people align with their true purpose and have the courage to stay there, have the courage to truly commit to that fully and show up every day in that energy, not feeling like you have to work 60 hours a week, or that working hard equals making more money. All of those things are BS lies that are not ultimately true. You do have to work, but that's my goal with everything that I do. So I talk about it in different ways, but it's always with that. And I feel like when I choose episodes for this show, and a huge part of it is your message. Like, I think that that's the part that's missing from a lot of the manifestation stuff about how to run like an energetic business. Your message still needs to be there. If you don't have a message, you can meditate and get into the energy of the thing that you want. But if you don't know what you're going to say, and you don't know how to tell people what you do, and you don't know how to articulate it, you're never going to believe in it enough to be able to get in the energy of the thing you want, because you're confused about it. So the clarity of your message is so important to you, and it's important to everybody that you talk to and come in contact with.
I love what you just shared about that, because yeah, I mean, it all starts within you. And also, you know, to this whole conversation just about like your true authentic self and what that looks like and how that comes across in business too. When you're developing your business and your marketing, that all needs to be there, and you need to be fully confident that everything you are doing is aligned, because you can only create content and communicate effectively if it's in alignment with ultimately what you want to be doing and how you want to be serving. And you, Nicole, actually helped me so much with this, just learning from you, because I, you know, when I first met Nicole, I was doing a lot different of an offer. I was doing fully custom content strategies, and through learning through Nicole and really like starting to think about, okay, what does like my true essence like really want to uncover, and, you know, what would my like most authentic self, how would that person actually show up and put their self forward? It helped me really refine my offer to really focus on this video podcast, because I was like, this is what's most fun to me. This is where my zone of genius comes across the most. This is where I feel like I can make the most impact, because it's the most leveraged for my clients, so they're getting more results out of it. So I felt like at that point in my business, when I went from these fully custom strategies to really saying, hey, putting the stake in the ground and saying, hey, I really am making this my recommendation, is it should be a video podcast for expert-based business owners, because that's what's going to be most effective and most streamlined for you. Everything started changing for me in terms of how I showed up, in terms of how easy things were like downloading to me, you know, my lead magnet and a mini course and like all these different components. And just in the way I was communicating with people too, just came across so much more easily, because I was able to connect pieces to my bigger vision. So I love that you just brought that all together.
Oh, well, I didn't know that coming in here. That's really lovely to hear. Thank you for saying all of that. And that just, that makes me so happy. Because we haven't even worked together. We are friends, friendly outside of this. You've listened to the podcast. So I had no idea. That's wonderful to hear. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
And that really is like, I think that that's a testament to when you're in alignment, this is how it gets to be easy. So when you hear people say it gets to be easy, it gets to be easy. It doesn't mean it's always easy, but this is when I hear people talk about alignment and how much alignment matters. That can sound like lip service when you're in the thick of it and you're working really hard and nothing seems to be working, or it's not working to the level that you want it to. And you say, well, I don't see how alignment is going to help me with this. So you purchase another strategy, you hire another strategic coach who's going to tell you their way, which is going to get you away from your authenticity, and it's going to cloud your vision. When you dig into who you are and you align with who you are, that's when your soul is like, thank you. I've been waiting for this moment. Now it gets to be easy. Now I'm on board with you. That's such a fantastic, I love that. I love that you're digging into this. Do you know your human design?
Oh boy. I know I'm a MG.
Yeah.
And my authority is sacral.
Mm-hmm.
And I forget my
What your profile number is.
Yeah.
That's okay. So you're a sacral manifesting generator. So you might change your mind again. Who knows? Like, but you're lit up by this right now. So it's easy for you, and you're working with people. So that exchange is probably giving you a lot of excitement, where that's you're accessing your zone of genius within your zone of genius. You're like, I'm going to do the thing that I love. I'm going to sit down. I'm going to talk to people. I'm going to converse with people, just like we're talking right now. If you're a generator of any kind, interview people and be interviewed, because that is where you will get the most out of things. And if you have an open throat, you get to access somebody else's defined throat there, where you're like, oh, I can suddenly, everything that I want to say is just coming out. It's exciting stuff. And this is how you can just leverage these little tools. I love all of this. And I love what you shared. And I love this whole concept of simple video, simple leveraged video that you can repurpose in a way that doesn't feel overwhelming. So just to kind of recap for everybody, this is the process. What it looks like is you're creating that big piece of content, that video podcast. You're going through it after, and you're digging through and you're finding these key points. And when you go in to create that podcast, you have a real through line. You're like, this is what I want to hit. These are the moments that I want to have in here, whether it's a solo episode or an interview. And then you go and you find those moments and you cut them into sliced pieces for smaller video. You make them into smaller posts. Maybe you make them into quote cards, which we do on this show. We have quote cards. We have all sorts of things that we offer. And they're just ways for you to suddenly you're like, I don't need to think about what I'm posting. Like, everything's kind of here. And I did it in a way that's fun. Like, most people find podcasting fun. There's very few people that I know that are like, I really hate podcasting or being a guest on people's shows. It's a fun process. So what a great way to take the like obligation feeling out of content creation, or that daunting feeling of like, I've got to do reels, or I've got to do it this way. You get to do it your way. I love it.
Yeah, I think the big takeaway, like if I could sum it up in what I just wish everybody would know is, at the end of the day, a successful business is being able to communicate effectively with your dream customers, right? And helping them understand the impact that you can have on your life. And I think that can often get lost in the world of, social content with trends and hacks and, all of those things that we do, with the algorithm in mind, and switching over to this format where, again, you have the space that you need. You're not limited to a certain number of characters. You're not limited to 60 seconds. You don't need to use a specific audio. You're really sitting down and you're asking yourself, what do I need to share? And then what does my audience need to understand, believe, see, visualize in order to feel confident in working for me? That is going to allow you just to show up a lot better, become a much better communicator, have people really deeply resonate with you. And that's going to be what moves the needle in your business a lot more than just something that gets the most reach or the most likes. So, I think that's really the biggest takeaway here, is just bringing it back to why am I even on Instagram anyway, or any of these platforms? It's really so that people will ultimately understand what I do and buy from me and be excited about that. But we often lose that sight of that because we get caught up in everything else. So just getting back to that, showing up on your terms, in your way, prioritizing your message is what's most important here.
Beautiful. I love it. And for everybody that wants to stay in touch with you, where can they find you? Is there anything that where can they learn more about what you do and how they can work with you?
Yeah, so you can go to connectthroughcontent.com. That's where you'll be able to sign up for my emails. And you can also follow me on Instagram. My handle is @connectthroughcontent.
Beautiful. We will link all of that up in the show notes, so you don't have to worry about writing that down. We've got you covered there. Just thank you so much, Jocelyn, for being here. This was a really fun conversation. I think that we gave people a new way to look at video and a new way to look at it that seems much more approachable than what we're currently seeing right now, which I think people were starting to get comfortable with video, and then Reels came in and they were like, oh, for fuck's sake, like I can't anymore. All right. So thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing all of this. Please go and follow Jocelyn on Instagram and connect with her by getting on her email list. You don't want to miss those updates from her. She obviously provides very valuable content to her audience because this is what she does. So go see her in action. And thank you. If you made it all the way to the end of this episode, I appreciate you. We appreciate you. Thank you for being a part of this conversation. And please go out in the world remembering that you are only limited by the limitations that you accept. And when you stop accepting those limitations, that is when you become limitless. So go out there and be limitless, everyone. Until the next time, I will see you. If you loved this episode, please leave us a review on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you're listening to this podcast. And if you want to stay in touch with us, we would love to have you as a part of our Facebook community, Practical Manifestors. It's a community for process-driven women looking for clear and actionable steps to embodying a life of wealth and alignment. Join us at Practical Manifestors in Facebook or go to www.innerceogroup.com.